it's fair to say that he is looking to try to take it out of the game. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for April 2nd. This is a little bit of a makeshift setup here. Everything at the Breakers in Palm Beach related to the NFL's annual meeting has been broken down now. We don't even have a table to work off of, but we're making this work for you to give you one final wrap-up of everything that happened here in South Florida. And really the big thing over the last 3 days was all the rules proposals, stuff relating to the game itself and stuff that you, the fan, is interested in. We're going to give you all of that today. And it's going to start with, I think, what's been the biggest hot button topic of these meetings, one of the biggest hot button topics of the last few months in the NFL, and that is what the league does about the Eagles push play. And one thing that I wanted to come away from this meeting with was a feel for where Commissioner Roger Goodell stood on the push play. And coming out of here, I feel like it's fair to say that he is looking to try to take it out of the game. And if you want the reason why it didn't pass here, I'd say there are two. I think number one is the most obvious one, which is that a lot of folks, not just with the Eagles, with other teams, view it as a non-competitive thing to take a play out of the game because that play is working for one specific team. And one specific team has reached a level of mastery with that play where it almost can't be stopped by anybody else. So I think most teams view that as not a good enough reason to take the play out. Number two, I think a huge part of this is the language and the way that the rule was presented by the Packers and some of the things that gave other coaches here room to poke holes in the rule as it was written by the Packers. Patriots coach Mike Vrabel was one. He brought up the idea of pushing the quarterback not behind the center but behind the guard. If the quarterback ran behind the guard, are you allowed to push him? Jim Harbaugh, the Chargers coach, brought up the idea of putting extra linemen in the game. It may be the most Harbaugh idea ever, and having them line up behind the guards and then push the guards. So there was a lot of discussion over the way the rule was written and presented, and they didn't have anywhere near enough support to pass the Packers proposal. However, while they were in the meeting, Rich McKay, the chairman of the competition committee, brought up the idea of going back to the rule as it was written in 2004. Now, that rule prevented offensive players from pushing or pulling teammates across lines. And the reason that it was repealed, the reason the rule was eliminated was because back then, 20 years ago, there was a problem that officials were having delineating whether, and this was on plays downfield where you'd have a scrum, you'd have a gang tackle, whether an offensive player coming into those scrums was blocking an opponent or pushing his teammate. And so to clean that up, they took that rule out. It had nothing to do with the application of it, of what the application of it would be with the Eagles. And so now going forward, they're going to look at the 2004 rule, the language of the 2004 rule, and whether it can work in 2025. I'd expect some version of the 2004 version of the rule to be presented to the owners at their May meeting in Minneapolis. I think at that point, Roger Goodell would probably push for the idea of some sort of ban of the push play going in. And one thing I do want to make clear here, too, the Eagles, of course, don't want the ban enacted. However, they made it really clear, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, that they want to go on the data here and that they believe that the injury data does not show any difference, that the injury data, and that's the reality of it, the injury data doesn't show any difference, that there isn't much of a difference in the posture of the quarterback on the push play versus a conventional quarterback sneak. But if this is a real health and safety matter, then they understand that and would understand it if a rule was put in. All right, the second rules change that I wanted to get to, here's the playoff seating change that was presented by the Lions. That didn't come close to passing. That, my understanding, only a handful of teams were on the Lions side of this. But I do think it raised an interesting point of contention for some teams with the way the seating works right now. Some owners and the league office felt like part of this is affecting the way week 17 and 18 play out and kind of what that means and where they and the way those games are played. And the Rams are probably a good example of it, where Sean McVay rested his starters in week 18 last year because they were locked in and they weren't even locked in, but they were locked into winning the division and playing at home in the first round of the playoffs. That winds up benefiting the Rams because they go and play a 14-win Vikings team that just got through a war with Detroit, and they had fresh legs, and they wound up running the Vikings off the field. So the feeling for some people is not just a fairness thing. Is this going to create better games in week 17 and week 18? Are we going to be able to have a better product in week 17 and week 18 if we just seed purely on record rather than giving the division champions the top 4 seeds in each conference? I think that's a fair question to ask. So this is something that I think is going to be discussed further at the May meeting. I'd be surprised if the playoff seeding changed for 2025, but it's something that they're going to monitor and something that I think will really come into play, when we start talking about the 18-game season, because as the season gets longer, coaches are going to be more cognizant of the wear and tear on players' bodies, and you're going to have to give coaches, I believe, more motivation to keep their keep their foot on the gas late in the year if there's any question of whether or not they have anything to play for. And the feeling is, in an open seating format, that there would be more motivators out there. There would be fewer teams locked in and more motivators out there to have your best players out there playing at their best level at the end of the season, which ultimately leads to a better product at the end of the regular season. Finally, the third rule change that I want to hit before we get out of here, head back home to Massachusetts, is the kickoff rule. So they tabled the onside kick. I think part of that's going to be language and vetting some of the unintended consequences that going to a full game format with the onside kick rule would bring. But they did vote through the kickoff, the modified kickoff as a permanent rule, and they're moving the touchback point from the 30 to the 35, feeling that would put more kickoff returns back in the game. They liked the results last year. Kickoff returns, there was an uptick, but they still felt like too many teams were using the touchback as a strategy to try to vet out what other teams were doing, and also feeling like there wasn't a huge difference between allowing a return and just taking the touchback. This makes the touchback a little bit more punitive for the kicking team and gives them a little bit more of a motivator to kick into the landing zone where there has to be a return. So it'll be interesting to see the results of that. Again, the onside kick part of it is tabled till the May meeting. And that's it. That's it from here. A relatively uneventful meeting when we're talking about quarterback sneaks as the main topic of discussion. I've been to way more eventful meetings than this one, but that'll do it for us from here in Palm Beach. We'll be back with our trade talk, with our Aaron Rodgers talk, with our draft talk, with our mailbag. That'll be tomorrow morning from back at home, and hope to have a Breer report for you at the end of the week on the pro day for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. That's on Friday. Appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate you guys sticking with us and checking out all of our content from here at the meeting. We will be back again tomorrow with the mailbag.